few things about the story here. Abraham and Sarah, they got a little weary with waiting. And by the way, it was like 25 years before the promise and the fulfillment of their son Isaac being born. So in the waiting, Sarah has the idea, well, take my maidservant Hagar and have a child with her so that we can get this promise going. We need a kid if this promise is going to happen, and it's not happening with me. Right? So now you could probably debate this. I don't know if this is like anti-faith or unbelief, or if this was like we're learning how to do faith and we're not doubting the promise, we're just trying to help. Right? And I think that so often we fall into that where it's like we want to take things into our own hands. God, you said, but now what can I do to make it happen? Right? But God didn't want their help. He didn't need their help. A few things about that decision. One was, it wasn't God's way. And there were consequences as a result. So Hagar does have a child from Abraham. And his name is Ishmael. And it creates some tensions and divisions within his household. And even today, the descendants of Abraham, of Isaac and Ishmael, it's two brothers, half-brothers, the conflict is still going on, which was promised in the Bible. So it wasn't without consequences. Now, the good news is that even though they tried to take things into their own hands and they kind of veered off of God's plan, it did not negate the promise that God had made. The promise was renewed, and eventually she does have Isaac, who is the child of promise. You know, Sarah becomes pregnant by Abraham, and they have a child named Isaac. Now, here's what's interesting. This is just a little sidebar, but Abraham's faith was in the promise of the descendant Isaac, right? That was the promise made to him. He put his faith in that. Do you know who ultimately came through Isaac's lineage that might be the Savior of the world? Anybody? Also known as Abraham's seed, not many seeds, but one, Christ. Find that in Galatians 3. So when Abraham was putting his faith, he was anchoring his faith in the revelation of that promise, God credited it to him as righteousness, meaning it's not fulfilled yet, like the righteousness part, the dying for the sins of the world hasn't happened yet, but because you put your faith in that promise of Isaac through whom the fulfillment would come, that righteousness, I'm going to credit it to you before it happens, because I know it's going to happen. So your faith is indirectly tied to Jesus through your faith in the promise of Isaac. Do you see that? Isn't that cool? Now, you know, he was looking forward to the fulfillment of that promise. Our faith is anchored in looking back on the fulfillment of that promise. Of their decision to take matters into their own hands, I just want to say, I think that if the father of faith is trying to figure out how to do faith, then there may be a part of learning how to operate in faith where you just don't know how to do it, and you just have to learn. But it's worth leaning into and learning to do even if you make mistakes. And your mistakes will not undo his faithfulness of what he's already established. And I think that's really good news, because I make mistakes. But I can anchor my faith into something that's in spite of me. Aren't you grateful for that? All right, so permission for you to learn to operate in faith. Understand there can be consequences. Understand that you may need to learn to wait on God, before you act. But just understand that on the journey, faith is something that is learned. You learn how to do faith, just like these guys did. Okay?